Yo, what's up guys? And here we are, we're back again to talk about Frost Mage macros. So in the comments of previous videos, this was requested by you guys, so here we are, we're gonna do it. And I want everybody to remember that this is applicable at the moment to the pre-patch, and these will be subject to change. But all being well, things won't change that badly, and we will be able to use these macros as soon as Shadowlands releases. Come on, Blizzard, give us Shadowlands. Okay, so let's get back to our macros. Let's start with the simple stuff. What is a macro? Macro, quite in its simplest form, is a cast sequence that will cast several abilities in the press of one key. Now, when you are writing a macro, it's important to remember that the game will read those abilities in the order that you place them in the macro. So, what does that mean for our macro? This means that we will be placing everything in the order that we would normally press them in-game as separate keybinds. So, I have everything set up to show you guys what a macro will look like. I have a couple of written ones that we're going to use, and they will all be available to everybody on my subscriber Discord, on my Twitch. I will leave links to everything in the description below. So, there's a couple of important things to remember about your macros when you're writing a macro. Okay, now, abilities that are affected by the in-game GCD most likely will not work. Excuse me, I just burped. My apologies. Now, what is a GCD? A GCD is a term used in-game as, quite simply, it's a global cooldown, and it lasts for 1 second. So, abilities like Frostbolt will cause a GCD. Several other abilities are going to cause your GCD. Now, the issue with having things like this in your macro is this. If we were to add a Frostbolt, for example, to our macro, it's going to cause a GCD. But that 1 second GCD then interrupts the game's ability to read the remainder of our cast sequence in our macro. Ergo, the abilities will just not cast, and the macro will then be a waste of time. It will not work. Okay, now, in previous expansions before the new GCD was introduced, we were able to do loads of crazy things with macros. I mean, we could use our burst macro, we could use an ability, we could, it was crazy. The damage was insane, and it was really good fun. But this GCD introduction has kind of limited the fun we can have with a macro. But nonetheless, we can still use our instant casts. Okay, so set up in-game, I have put an additional action bar onto the screen to explain to you guys how this is going to affect our in-game play and our macros. So what we're going to look out for is, on the left-hand side of my character, I have 3 abilities on the action bar that are unaffected by the GCD, and I have 3 abilities on the right-hand side of the character that are affected by the global cooldown. So you will see the difference when we cast a simple Frostbolt. It will explain it in its entirety. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going to happen. So, here we are. We're in beautiful Pandaria. Was, and probably will be my favourite expansion of all time, unless Shadowlands absolutely blows my socks off. Now, here on the left-hand side of the character, we have our abilities, and one racial, important to remember for your macro, that are unaffected by the global cooldown. Here on the right-hand side, we have 3 abilities that are affected by the global cooldown, and you'll see the difference. I'm going to cast 1 Frostbolt at this dummy, and you'll see what happens. I cast a Frostbolt, all 3 of these abilities suffer a global cooldown. Cast another one, you notice on the left-hand side, these 3 abilities do not suffer the global cooldown. Ergo, they are instantly castable and can be used in a cast sequence macro. Okay, now, what does a cast sequence macro look like? Well, that's what we're going to look at next. Let's take a look at some of my macros. Alright, so we're going to type /macro enter. And up pops my macros. And we're going to go to Jericho's specific macros. Okay, so here, this is my opener macro. Okay, the big boy burst macro that everybody loves to pop and just go nuts on those meters. Okay, so a lot of people don't really explain it, so I'm going to explain it. Hashtag show tooltip at the start of your macro. Basically what this will do is whichever ability you have in the first line of your macro, when you hover over your action bar, that is the tooltip of the ability that you will see. Okay, now most people will put their icy veins there. I know what my macro's for, I know my keybinds. It doesn't really matter to me. My macro remains unaffected by this order. But it is important in some scenarios to remember that the order you place your abilities in may affect the functionality of your macro. Okay, so you always want to start off with the order that you would press them in if they were individually keybind. So that is the way you would place them in your macro. So let's say it was your mirror, like mine's mirror image, berserking, and icy veins. If you want your tooltip to say icy veins, you're going to put icy veins to the top, leave your berserking in the middle, and put your mirror images to the bottom. Okay, this particular macro, unaffected. But just thought I would explain that. So, when you cast your burst macro, it's going to pop all of these in one go. And we went over it in the last video. Don't precast a bloody rune of power after you precast your frostbolt on your opener. You're going to get that rune of power. Don't waste it. Okay, so we'll take a look at what happens when I pop this macro. Okay, so let's close this. We're going to precast, and we're going to burst. Time Warp didn't pop on this one because this is my regular burst macro. It's important to remember that you can't just have one burst macro as a Frost Mage because you're not always going to use your Time Warp on the pull. Your raid leader will advise you when to use your Time Warp, so don't piss him off, or her for that matter, by having this macro that I'm currently using with Time Warp as your go-to default macro. Okay, so we're going to go into the second macro that I use, and I'll show you what that looks like now. Alright, so that's what happens when you pop your macro, okay? In the order they appear in the macro, that's how the game reads your cast sequence, okay? It's just like an individual keystroke in the game, except the game reads it in the order that you've placed it in the macro. Okay, now, one important thing to remember about these macros is this. If you place anything in there that suffers a GCD, and I hear you say, oh, what's a GCD? Well, GCD is a term in-game, and it is a global cooldown. Now, the global cooldown lasts 1 second. Now, if we were to pop, say, an Ice Lance in the middle of that macro, the global cooldown would interrupt the game's ability to read the remainder of the macro. Okay, so you don't want to do that, because you're going to come back to me and you're going to say, oh my god, I put this extra thing in my macro and now my macro doesn't work. It's not working because you interrupted the game reading the cast sequence, because you caused a GCD in the middle of the macro. Okay, so we're going to try and stay away from that. Okay, right. So, abilities that are affected by the GCD will most likely require a cast sequence macro. That's quite complex, and we're trying to keep it simple. Okay? Now, other macros that we're going to look at while we're waiting on Icy Veins to come off cooldown so that I can show you the Time Warp opener macro are mouse overs. Okay? So, a mouse over macro, quite simply, is, for the purpose here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Blizzard, and I am going to keybind it to, I'll keep it ended to where I have my macro. Okay, so when you cast your Blizzard looks like this. You press the keybind, you get a big fancy green circle, and then you click here. And it will cast your Blizzard. Seems reasonable. It can be better. And we're going to use a macro for that. So I'm going to show you again. I'm going to press it. And then I have to click my mouse. Okay? Seems pretty reasonable. Now, watch the difference. This is a good example of a mouse over macro. Okay? So I'm going to mouse over this dummy, and I'm going to Blizzard. Right hand off the mouse. No green circle. I don't have to then place the Blizzard, and then, to slow myself down even more, click on my mouse. We'll do it again. I've moused over, so we'll mouse over this target, right hand free, Boom. Cast your blizzard. Very, very useful. It's more efficient. Okay? And efficiency is what us frost mages are all about. So let's take a look at what that macro looks like in the game. Let's open up our macros. We're going to slash macro. Here we go. Slash macro. And we're going to look at blizzard. So, here in the tooltip, you can see, again, hashtag show tooltip, slash cast, squared, open bracket, at cursor, close square bracket, blizzard. It's as simple as that. A big important thing to remember about all of your macros is this. They are case sensitive. So if any macro has a capital letter, a full stop, a symbol, a close bracket, open bracket that aren't square, your macro, is case sensitive. So it must be exactly correct to the tooltip in the game, or the game will not be able to read it. So, now we have our ICV and soft cooldown, we'll go back to my time warp opener. Okay, so we're going to go back to time warp. Again, remembering these abilities here are affected by the global cooldown, and these abilities aren't. So, we'll do our opener again, and we'll pop all the good stuff. And time warp. There we go. All in one. Let's, for argument's sake, just pop the orb like we are actually bursting. And we're having a good old time. I didn't pop condensed life force, but whatever. Didn't double ice lance there, but whatever. We're just talking about macros. Alright. So this macro, again, you're going to just take it from the first one here. If you want icy veins to pop up as your tooltip, that's what you're going to put in the first line of your macro. This macro here includes my time warp. I have a separate keybind for it because I don't want shouted at by my raid leader for popping time warp when we didn't need it. Okay, so those are a couple of important things to remember as well when you're going to use macros. These macros here will be available, of course, on my Discord. We already mentioned that, and we'll get down to it. Everybody's getting a look at them now, so it's a sneaky peek. It's a sneaky peek. Now, Counterspell is another very, very, very useful macro. This macro is a stop casting macro. Okay, so again, show tooltip, Counterspell, slash stop casting, cast Counterspell. What this macro will do for you is, if you're in the middle of a cast build and it's your turn to make an interrupt, it will instantly stop the cast of your Frostbolt and make the interrupt. So you don't have to move to interrupt your spell cast, you just press the button, okay? And it will instantly cast at the target you have currently selected. Now you can change this to a mouse over one, you just need to add the mouse over close square brackets. Okay, very, very simple. Now, another very simple and very useful macro is your stop casting ice block, okay? A lot of people would argue that you don't need this macro because you can cast your ice block and you can cancel your ice block just by pressing the button again. Now, the thing about it is this is fractionally faster, okay? Because it will instantly stop a cast of your Frostbolt or whatever the case may be, or whatever you are casting. It will cast your ice block, and then on the second keystroke, it will cancel the aura of your ice block, and it is faster. And I'll demonstrate just like that. 2 keystrokes. Okay? Now, you can practice that without the macro, and you will see a significant difference in how long it takes you to cancel that ice block. Okay? And we're mages. We want as much uptime as we can possibly get. This macro will give you a split second more. Might only be 1, maybe 1.5 seconds, but it all counts. You know, that 1 second, it's another GCD. It's another Frostbolt. It's a chance to proc another Flurry or an Ice Lance. And we want those big numbers. Okay, another very, very useful macro is your remove curse. Okay, this is another at mouse over target. Okay, slightly different. Show tooltip, remove curse. Slash cast, open square bracket, at mouse over, comma, space, exists, comma, space, help, close square bracket, remove curse. And this will in turn then remove curse from your selected target. Obviously I can't do that on a dummy, but trust me, it will work. Okay, again, going into another mice over macro, and this is your polymorph. Now, I've just called my macro sheep because there's a picture of a sheep. Go figure. So, this one is quite simply, again, show tooltip, polymorph, /cast, open square brackets, target equals mouse over, close your square bracket, and then space polymorph. Again, absolutely case sensitive. If you do not type everything into your macro case sensitive, the game will not read it. Okay. But those macros, guys, are a really, really, really good foundation, a good introduction as to what a macro can do for you, what a macro is, and how it's affected by the global cooldown in game. And trust me, when you get a little bit of practice with these macros, you will see an improvement in your gameplay. Your friends will probably see an improvement in your gameplay. So, there we go, guys. There is your quick macro guide for your Frost Mage in the pre-patch. Again, I'm going to stress some of these macros may be subject to change. As we know, we're not max level yet, but most, if not all of the rules we've just went over will apply to the way you create a macro. If you're not confident enough to write a macro, please visit my Discord. It's available to every subscriber on my Twitch. I will have links in the description below to my Discord, my Twitch, and all of my socials. Guys, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure to bring you this video. Thank you so much for the very, very kind support you're giving me recently. I know I've been pretty absent on YouTube over the last wee while, but I did make a promise, and my efforts will continue to keep you guys on the top of your game playing your Frost Mage. So upcoming soon, we're going to do some Ret Paladin stuff, because I am going to play a Ret Pally as well. I think I'm probably going to bench the Warrior, because they just look pretty darn bad at the moment. But anyway, guys, thank you once again. I'm going to close out by saying, statistically, guys, upwards of 60% of viewers who watch content creators stuff on YouTube don't hit that sub button. Don't be that guy. Hit the sub button, show some love, and in turn, I will answer your requests in the comments of the videos, and I will try to do everything I can to get you a video that you've requested that you haven't been able to find. So thank you very much once again, guys. Much love. This is me signing out for this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and let's try to get 50 to 100 likes. I think we'll shoot for the stars on this one. 50 to 100 likes would be awesome. Any more than that will absolutely knock my socks off. But once again, guys, thank you so much. Love you all. I'll see you soon. Leave your likes. Leave your comments. If there's anything else that you'd like to see on your Frost Mage, please, again, in the comments below, just let me know, and I will be sure to accommodate. But for now, it's goodbye, much love, and see you in the next video.